Other interesting political news, you have the United Auto Workers rejecting the insulting General Motors offer, aka a realistic offer. Now, it looks like GM's proposal included the largest 4-year wage hike in decades, roughly 10%. However, that's far less than the 40% the unions are asking for and seeking. Now, I kind of debate where I put this in terms of the show. UAW is a huge political mechanism. Unions in general, I believe during 2020, was it 2020, they gave $1.8 billion in political donations. So they're a huge political movement, UAW in particular, that I suspect that was one of the reasons they got bailed out in 2009. They donated to the people who just coincidentally chose them to be bailed out when many other companies just kind of died and went away. Coincidence? No, I don't think so. Now, you have the UAW president, who makes a pretty penny. I've been looking at it. It's very interesting how they hide data at the UAW, as well as shutting down comments. I find that kind of a sure sign that maybe their ideals are indefensible, perhaps. So there's instances where there are people in the comments, and I actually had a conversation on YouTube with someone who actually works at a GM factory, and it was an interesting back and forth. Got to learn a little bit about his experiences. I explained to him my perspective and what I was looking at in terms of the global automotive landscape and what you need to be competitive. And I didn't shut down those conversations. I encouraged them, because I would argue I'm just an old-fashioned American. I actually believe I might not agree with everything you're saying, but I'll fight to the death for your right to say it, which is something every American should believe in, because that's how our country was founded. But I partially digress. On UAW's YouTube channel, they disable all comments. On my channel, not to brag, but comments will always remain open. The only time it's been disabled is when YouTube disabled them, which ironically, when I made a YouTube video critiquing YouTube censorship, they shut down the comments. And then I had 2 Bud Light videos where they shut them down. Every time when I go inside the back end YouTube studio and I select my default button of allow all comments, it immediately reverted back to disable comments. So that's something you'll always see when you tune into my show. And well, eventually when we get big enough, we have more high enough volume of comments, we'll even have a comment section on the show. So I really appreciate you taking the time to comment if you have a couple of seconds to do so. Now, Sean Fain says, quote, after refusing, again, he's a UAW president, quote, after refusing to bargain in good faith for the past 6 weeks, only after having federal labor board charges filed against them, GM has come to the table with an insulting proposal that doesn't come close to the equitable agreement for America's auto workers, unquote. He continues to say, quote, the clock is ticking. Stop wasting our members' time. Tick tock, unquote. Now, he is certainly sensational, to say the least. I would say I don't think he's effective at marketing, because I don't think the messaging he's putting out will actually get them the negotiating. It's not going to get them what they want, but he is certainly effective in marketing. He actually had a whole YouTube video where he took the offer from Stellantis, which is the global parent company behind Chrysler, as well as Dodge and Jeep. He actually threw their offer in the trash bin, or if you're European, the dust bin. And so I was going to say, imagine if GM did that to him. Oh, he would be crying like no tomorrow. There'd be even more protests and more strikes. The hypocrisy is all too common among them. Now, it looks like he's saying they better hurry up, and that's true. I mean, how many days until the 14th? Because that's Thursday this week. It expires on the 14th, their current contract the contract that they have. So the clock is quite literally ticking more and more. Now, in terms of leverage, I think he has the least amount of leverage to GM and Chrysler specifically, because they have the least amount of U.S.-based employees. Ford has the greatest amount of U.S.-based employees in the automotive community for the United Auto Workers. And Ford and Stellantis just got to remain globally competitive. They went to Mexico and set up more shops there, which of course has better, not only much cheaper labor costs, but also the government is they're less strict. They don't have the EPA trying to shut down your business over there. Let's just say that. So it's not just that one factor, but that is a factor, which is why many companies choose to leave the United States, unfortunately. Now, in terms of what the UAW is asking for, just to name a few, they're asking for a 40% wage hike. In fairness, it's over 4 years, but it actually is a compounding. So to account to 46%, they want a cost of living increase, increased retirement benefits, a pension. They want a 32-hour work week, but they want to be paid 40 hours, and an end to the 2-tier pay system, just to name a few. And perhaps it's just like Trump's art of the deal. You ask for everything, then you're willing to negotiate a couple things. But I don't know if he's playing hardball, but I'm not hearing them really coming to the table with anything less. They're asking for they're not just asking for the farm. They're asking for the farm and the barn and the house and everything. The whole kit and caboodle. Now, again, this is right now with the current things the UAW is proposing. It's going to cost, again, these companies $80 billion each over 4 years. That's a big number. Now, again, that's if they get everything they ask for. So right now, that cost is $80 billion over 4 years, when these contracts are 4-year contracts. And again, I don't think there's no conceivable way they're getting everything they want. It's not going to happen. You have their competition, you have Tesla growing exponentially. They do not have a union. You have Toyota, Honda, both growing. They don't have unions either. The cost of labor, and even just the 2009 statistics alone, looking at the comparison between the hourly wages of assembly line workers, they're much cheaper and more effective at Toyota and Honda, and the cars are more reliable. I'm not saying every GM car is going to break down. I'm just saying statistically, the other cars will last longer. There's a reason Toyota will last a quarter of a century and 1 million miles. And in fairness, after the interaction with the folks in the comment section, I do agree that's partially because they use cheaper parts. Partially they have to because partially the labor is increased, so there's less money to work with. There are a lot of variables that go into the reliability of a car. Is it interestingly enough that the most American cars, according to cars.com, in terms of made in the USA, were Tesla? They got the top 3 or 4 positions, and then Honda and Acura, which is owned by Honda. And I believe you had one more Japanese company. I think it might have been Lexus, which is owned by Toyota. And they define it American as the percentage of parts made in the USA as well as the assembly in the USA. I think GM wasn't there until the Corvette at, I think number 30 out of 100. So it's one of those instances where the other companies are actually, depending on who you talk to and who you debate, you could say more American. They have headquarters here. They have lots of factories here. They make a lot of great cars in Kentucky over at Toyota. I know people who consider them a Texas-based company because they moved their headquarters from California to Plano, Texas, bringing thousands of jobs, boosting the economy. So it'll be interesting to see as the clock is quite literally ticking, because don't get me wrong, there's always, a wise man once said, there's no solutions, only trade-offs. It's true, if they do allow the strike, that's going to cost GM money. It's going to cost Chrysler money, it's going to cost Ford money. So they could hire third party, or pejoratively, I believe they're referred to as scabs. But we should think of it, what's the antithesis of a scab? What could we call them? Maybe we call them band-aids. We might have to have that trending someday on the Twitter. GM hires band-aids. Because again, right, if they give them everything they want, I think it would just handicap and kneecap the company. Because again, they're making profits now, but they also need to put that into, I would argue, 2 things they should be investing in right now. 1, research and development before EVs. I don't think EV is a long-term, again, there are a lot of variables in technology specifically as well, where we might have an EV car that comes out tomorrow that will last a quarter century and 1 million miles. That's not how the tech is today. Also not very recyclable or good for the environment in terms of being green, but they look green. So that's perception. Personally, the best ROI for the planet and you is just buy a Corolla, the best-selling car in history, made by Toyota. That's 1 million miles, quarter century, good old internal combustion engine. Pretty good ROI. But these companies need to reinvest in the new technologies because that's what they want. Well, that's what the government is forcing them to do as well. And they kind of need a rainy day fund because, again, you have 40-year hyperinflation. And again, that I know that affects the workers as well. I'm not saying they should get anything. I'm just saying they need to think about the economic uncertainty. What if people stop buying cars? The rate of buying cars is decreasing for many reasons. Partially because of the exponential increase in interest rates. Which again, that's not the fault of employees or the corporate GM. I would personally blame the government for printing more money than you could possibly imagine, but that's an outside factor that's affecting the situation right now. And in this hyper-competitive market, right now, if you believe in EVs, Tesla has an overwhelming lead on the competition, even now. I remember a couple years back, Nissan and a couple of competitors opened up a Tesla, and they said, dear God, we're 13 years behind this in terms of technology. So it'll be interesting to see. GM's gone bankrupt a couple times ever since Billy Durant founded the company when he combined Buick and Oldsmobile. And people think I hate have an antithesis against certain people and the UAW. I just don't think it's competitive right now. And again, the competition is fierce, and sales are slowing down. The competition is fierce, and I don't think long term it's going to be financially viable. So let me know in the comments. Do you think will the strike come through fruition? If so, how long will it last? People think they're only trying to cut in terms of cost of the UAW. General Motors specifically, they they bought out 5,000 people in terms of their contracts in February this year so that they can just get rid of their positions. So instead of firing them or paying them a severance, they paid them for the remainder of their contract, to my understanding, and they let them go. That's 5,000 salary positions. They're trying to do cuts everywhere. And I got some people on LinkedIn actually pointing to, because I asked them, what was it? Do you think the UAW will bankrupt the companies? A lot of people pointing to the salaries of the CEOs. Well, that's what the shareholders agree to. They're fine with that. Otherwise, they would speak up or protest or vote it down. Also, they're not getting paid I think someone said Mary Barr made $27 million. That's a total compensation. I think it was a couple of million, don't get me wrong. But the rest was stock. Okay. Is that really affecting the price of the car? No, not really. But there are a lot of interesting variables. I'd love to know your experience. If you work at maybe corporate for the UAW, or if you work on the assembly line, I'd love to hear your experiences. Let me know, do you think it's going to happen? What other variables should I take into account for my update of this situation as it continues to evolve and is a very fluid situation? It'll be interesting to see, but I really appreciate your feedback, and I love having these conversations where we're both learning, and it'll be interesting to see where we go from here. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to tune in. Again, I know it's ambitious, but we're trying to get to 4,000 subscribers by the end of September, so if you click that button, I would greatly appreciate it. Also, I really appreciate the feedback as we try to make the show better and better. Slowly but surely, perhaps, getting better at my enunciation and slowing down my speech patterns, as many of you in the comments noted that was something you did not appreciate and you wanted me to work on. So that's something where we're working together to make this show better and better. Also, don't forget to tell your family, tell your friends, tell your coworkers, heck, tell your enemies, tell anyone and everyone. Just stay safe, fight the good fight.